Imagine a colossal, sky-piercing tower of wealth, representing billions of dollars in net worth. And right at the base of that tower, a tiny, rusty coin. That coin is the actual income tax paid by the tower's owner. This is not an exaggeration. This is the mathematics of the ultra-wealthy. In the years when the assets of the world's top tech billionaires grew by tens of billions of dollars, leaked tax records revealed their taxable income was astonishingly low. In some cases, they even qualified for tax credits intended for middle-income families. You might think this is tax evasion, but you would be wrong. Evasion is a crude, risky crime. What is happening here is far more sophisticated, a masterpiece of financial engineering that operates entirely within the legal framework, designed to protect wealth from the erosion of civic duty. This is not a system flaw. It is a feature custom designed for the 0.01%. In the next few minutes, we won't just lament the injustice. We will disassemble this machine, screw by screw, gear by gear, to understand exactly how the ultra-wealthy turn a massive fortune into a neat zero on a tax return through a strategy known as buy, borrow, and die. To grasp this mechanism, we must first accept the fact that the modern tax system was not designed to tax wealth. It was designed to tax income. And these are two fundamentally different concepts. For the vast majority of people, income and wealth are synonymous. You go to work, you receive a salary, that's income, and you are taxed immediately. But for the ultra-wealthy, income is what they actively avoid. Their entire strategy revolves around one core concept: unrealized gains. Imagine you buy a stock for $10. 10 years later, that stock is worth $1,000. In reality, you are $990 richer. You can feel your purchasing power increase. The bank sees it, the world sees it, but the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, does not. In the eyes of the tax authority, that $990 profit is invisible. It doesn't exist. It sits in a state of limbo, like Schrodinger's cat, both real and not real. Only when you sell that stock does the profit transition from unrealized to realized, and that is when the tax event occurs. This is the foundation of the first step in the strategy: buy and accumulate. The richest people in the world don't hold cash in a bank account because cash is eroded by inflation and savings interest is taxable income. Instead, they pour all their resources into capital growth assets, primarily stocks, commercial real estate, or private equity. Their goal is not to generate a monthly cash flow for spending, but to maximize the growth of their net worth in the form of unrealized gains. As long as they don't sell, they don't pay tax. But here is where the paradox emerges. If all your wealth is tied up in stocks and you don't sell them, how do you get the money to buy supercars, yachts, or mansions? How do you afford your luxurious lifestyle if your bank account is technically empty? If you sell assets for spending money, you immediately trigger the capital gains tax. Depending on where you live and your income bracket, this figure can be up to 20% or 30% of the asset's value. For a billionaire, selling stock to spend is like having to cut off a part of their own body. It is capital destruction. To solve the liquidity problem without triggering a tax event, they move to the second, most crucial phase, where the financial magic truly happens: borrow. Instead of selling assets, they use their massive investment portfolio as collateral to borrow money from a bank. In finance circles, this tool is called a securities-backed line of credit. Let's do a simple comparison to see the drastic difference in position. When an average person borrows money for a house or a car, the bank has to assess their income, check their credit score, and apply a relatively high interest rate to offset the risk. But when a billionaire knocks on the bank's door, they bring a multi-billion-dollar portfolio as collateral. The risk to the bank is virtually zero. Therefore, the bank is willing to offer them enormous loans at ultra-low interest rates, often just slightly above the prime rate. Why would they choose to borrow when they have a mountain of money in stocks? Let's do a logic problem. Suppose a billionaire needs $10 million in cash to buy a vacation villa. If he sells $10 million worth of stock, assuming most of it is profit, he will have to pay about $2.4 million in capital gains tax, assuming a 24% rate for simplicity. The original $10 million is now only $7.6 million available. But if he borrows $10 million from the bank at 3% a year, he only has to pay $300,000 in interest. Most importantly, under current tax law in most developed countries, loan proceeds are not considered income. Therefore, the $10 million flowing into his account is completely tax-free. They have cash to spend, they maintain ownership of the stock. And the best part is, the collateral continues to grow in value. If their portfolio grows 8% a year, while the borrowing rate is only 3%, they're actually making money even while in debt. This is the art of arbitrage at the personal level. They turn debt from a burden into a tool for generating tax-free cash flow. In the wealthy mindset, debt is not an evil to be avoided, but a cheap raw material to operate the financial machine. However, any loan has a term and must be repaid. You can roll over the debt, take out a new loan to pay off the old one, but ultimately, debt is still debt. If you sell assets to repay the debt, you return to the initial problem, paying taxes. So how do they escape this loop? The answer lies in the final phase, a phase that sounds grim but is the golden key to erasing all obligations: die. In technical terms, this strategy relies on a legal provision called step up in basis. This is the biggest loophole, or rather, the biggest gift the tax system offers to the elite. Let's look closely at how this mechanism works.
Assume our billionaire bought a stock 40 years ago with a cost basis of $1. Today, when he dies, that stock has a market price of $1,000. Throughout his life, that $999 difference was unrealized gain and was never taxed. By conventional logic, when the heir receives this asset, they should be responsible for that latent tax. But no. The step-up in basis rule allows the cost basis of the asset to be adjusted at the time of inheritance transfer. The moment the billionaire passes away, the IRS resets the stock's cost basis from $1 to $1,000. The entire $999 growth accumulated over the past 40 years is completely wiped from tax history. It vanishes forever. The heir receives the stock with a new cost basis of $1,000. If they sell it the next day for $1,000, the taxable profit is zero. The tax due is zero. At this point, the heir can sell a small portion of the asset completely tax-free to repay the bank loans that the billionaire spent while alive. The final result is a perfect closed loop. They lived a lavish life on borrowed money, paid no income tax, and when they passed away, the enormous tax debt also disappeared into thin air. To see the devastating efficiency of this, let's conduct a real-world comparison simulation between two hypothetical characters, Dr. Henry and Billionaire Bruce. Henry is a talented neurosurgeon who earns $500,000 a year in salary. Bruce is an asset owner whose wealth grows by $500,000 a year. Both have the same numerical increase in wealth annually, but their financial fates are completely different. Every year when Henry receives his salary, the tax system immediately deducts about 37% of his income for federal, state, and Social Security taxes. The actual amount flowing into Henry's pocket is only $315,000. He must use this truncated amount for spending and investing. Henry's ability to accumulate wealth is hampered from the start by an invisible yet powerful drag force. Conversely, Bruce's assets increase by $500,000 in the form of unrealized gains. No tax event occurs. No tax return is filed. Bruce's asset bar retains 100% of its growth value. When he needs cash to spend, Bruce borrows $100,000 from the bank. He only has to pay a few $1,000s in interest. This interest amount is vastly smaller than the $185,000 in taxes that Henry lost. After 30 years, the difference is not just addition, but the power of compound interest. Henry is trying to get rich with post-tax money, while Bruce is getting rich with pre-tax money. The tax money that Bruce should have paid remains in his investment account, continuing to multiply year after year. This is why the wealth gap constantly widens. The rich are not just better at making money, they are operating on a completely different financial operating system, where income tax is a voluntary option rather than a mandatory obligation. So the question is this a system bug that needs to be patched or a feature that is intentionally maintained? The answer may be uncomfortable for many. It is a feature. The modern tax system is built on the economic assumption that encouraging capital accumulation and investment will benefit the entire economy by creating jobs and infrastructure. The government wants private capital to stay in the market, building factories, financing startups, rather than being withdrawn to pay taxes. Rules like step-up in basis or tax exemptions for loans were created with the intention of encouraging the circulation of capital. However, when these tools are combined at the ultra-large scale of the 0.01%, they create an unintended side effect, a near absolute tax immunity for the super-rich. They become first-class passengers on the economic ship, enjoying all the best amenities while contributing the least to the cost of operating that ship. While workers and the middle class bear the majority of the national budget burden through income tax on wages, the financial elite glide past customs barriers with invisible legal structures. It is important to remember that what we have just analyzed is only the tip of the iceberg. The buy, borrow, die strategy only addresses domestic personal income and capital gains tax issues. But for a global billionaire, the threat comes not only from the domestic tax authority, but also from legal risks, political volatility, and huge inheritance taxes that can reach 40% of net worth. To counter these threats, they need a denser, more complex layer of protection that is beyond the reach of any single government. That is when the money starts moving across national borders. It doesn't travel in suitcases of cash like in 90s action movies. It travels through fiber optic cables in the form of digital code commands, weaving through shell companies, anonymous trusts, and anchoring in tax havens where the concept of financial transparency does not exist. Once assets are securely protected by the buy, borrow, die strategy domestically, their next step is to make the ownership of that asset legally ownerless. How can you own a $500 million yacht but legally own nothing on paper? How can multinational corporations shift billions of dollars in profit to a tiny island in the Caribbean without violating transfer pricing laws? We're talking about the world of offshore trusts and shell companies in the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, or the British Virgin Islands. This is where the law is written for the buyer, and privacy is considered the most precious commodity. To understand how this invisible money truly flows through the global shadow financial network, and how an individual can become a global citizen not subject to the control of any nation, we need a separate and more detailed investigation. The world financial system is like a vast ocean. What we see on the surface are just small waves. The true, powerful currents that determine the direction of the entire ocean flow deep beneath in the dark and the silence. buy, borrow, die is just the first key to unlock the door to that world. And the next door leading to offshore tax havens awaits our exploration. Keep your curiosity, because the truth always lies where the fewest dare to look.